I'm so delighted that the Reverend Dr. James Kenneth Echols, who's my senior in every way, will lead off. We've had this going for many years. We're so grateful that he's leading off this 150th anniversary celebration. When I arrived here a number of years ago, he was giving the 125th anniversary lecture, and it was stunning. So you could just do the same, but not only is he the appropriate person to have here, but Jim has made history here. Jim is part of the fabric of this school and has shaped the history, not only by becoming the first African-American dean in this school, but in the whole of the ELCA, and not only in shaping the Urban Theological Institute and helping to create a dynamic faculty as dean here. But then he went on from here to become the first African-American president of one of our seminaries, none other than the Lutheran School of Theology at Chicago. So just to take one step back, you already know he was dean here from 1991 to 97. He joined the faculty in 1982, teaching American church history. He's a native of Philadelphia and received his BA from Temple and an MDiv from this school, so we claim you, Jim, as an alum. He continued his studies at Yale University, where he received his MA, MPhil, and PhD in the history of Christianity. He's been a leader in the ELCA and in the wider church community, serving on the board of the ELCA Division for Ministry, the Executive Committee of the Association of Theological Schools in the United States and Canada, and the Steering Committee of the USA section of the Council of International Black Lutherans. He's the editor of I Have a Dream, Martin Luther King Jr., and the Future of Multicultural America, Minneapolis Fortress Press, 2004. Dr. Echols, welcome home. Please join me in welcoming him.
Good morning. Good morning. This is the day that the Lord has made, so let us rejoice and be glad in it. Thank you, Dr. Cray, President Cray, for your very gracious introduction. When he picked me up at the airport last night, I reminded him that his birthday is tomorrow. And my birthday is later in May, and we are always 1 year apart. So we never are the same age. He's always older and will be so for eternity. But I need to say it was a real joy to serve with him as one of the seminary presidents of the ELCA. He has a delightful sense of humor. He has a seriousness about the task of theological education and has been, in my judgment, a superb leader of this institution now for 15 years. You are lucky to have him. I also want to say it's good to be home. Philadelphia is the place of my birth. It is where I was nurtured by my family, where I went to school, where I went to seminary, where so many of our best friends still live. And I can't tell you how often Donna suggests that Bishop Burkett could really get me a call in the Philadelphia area if she wanted to, and we could move back to Philadelphia, where we have enjoyed so many relationships over the course of so many years. So I want to say it's good to be back on this seminary campus. It's interesting to note how it has evolved since I first set foot on this campus in 1974, when, as I recall, there was a newly renovated main dorm where the library had just been updated and renovated, and now to see the further developments, of which I will speak in a moment, is just, to use President Cray's word, stunning. So we will be back sometime this summer to visit with family and friends, and I remember with great appreciation my 3 years as a student here on this campus and my 15 years as a member of the faculty. And I do, by the way, want us to sing happy birthday to President Cray sometime tomorrow, given his advancing age. If this presentation has any title, it would be Historical Impressions of LTSP at 150 years of age. I was both honored and somewhat intimidated to do this as a church historian who has turned seminary administrator and who has then turned ELCA staff person. And so what I hope to offer here are some historical impressions that are subject to further historical investigation through extensive research in the archives, in oral history, and in various seminary publications. For each major section of this presentation deserves to be its own book-length chapter. So I will offer these and invite your own personal stories and testimonies as we fill in the details of this institution's journey in the ministry of theological education in service of the gospel of Jesus Christ. On the occasion of the 125th anniversary of the Lutheran Theological Seminary at Philadelphia, Dr. Helmut T. Lehman, then a professor emeritus member of the faculty, wrote one of the essays for the collection of articles along with President Van Orsdal and Professors Lathrop, Ruhman, and Rohrbaugh. Dr. Yaroslav Pelikan, who lectured as a part of the anniversary, did not have his lecture included in the volume. And for whatever it is worth, when I contacted the seminary to inquire if there had been a 125th anniversary publication, I was graciously reminded that I contributed an essay on Charles Michael Jacobs. At any rate, though it wasn't memorable to me, I will accept Dr. Cray's characterization of the essay as stunning. At any rate, Dr. Lehman noted this about the anniversary in his contribution. He wrote, "Anniversaries can become signs of telling where we have been, where we are, and where we think we might be going. Anniversaries are events which commemorate occurrences we consider worthwhile. They can help us remember in the present what is significant for us in the past and to chart the future." Now we begin the 150th anniversary celebration for this distinguished and wonderful institution, under the theme, Living Out the Legacy of Our Dynamic Past, and pause to consider once again where it has been, where it is now, and where it thinks it might be going in the future. In doing so, we note that Dr. Theodore G. Tappert wrote the history of the seminary on the occasion of the 100th anniversary in 1964. So the seminary was founded towards the end of the Civil War and turned 100 in the midst of the civil rights movement. I think that's very significant. The living legacy of LTSP has to do with being faithful and adapting to its context. In the 19th century, Lutherans disagreed about the matter of confessional subscription. Some Lutherans, including Samuel Simon Schmucker and several colleagues at Gettysburg Seminary, no offense, Dr. Cray, you're a graduate of Gettysburg, sought to amend the Augsburg Confession to make it more amenable to Reformed Christianity in the United States. You see, he had attended Princeton Seminary and been influenced by Reformed Christianity there. Considering the context and intent upon being faithful to the Lutheran tradition, those who were committed to the conservative Reformation formed this institution, namely LTSP. And interestingly, this seminary became known for translating multiple editions of the Book of Concord. So over time, the Henry Eister Jacobs, Theodore G. Tappert, and the Timothy Wengert and Robert Kolb editions have been published here in the United States. In witness to the importance of those confessional writings. This living legacy of being faithful to the context has blossomed at this seminary in a different way over the last 50 years. In order to be faithful to the context in which this gospel is proclaimed and lived out, LTSP has now become increasingly ecumenical, much more inclusive, and much more involved in the life of the local community. So let's look at a few of these developments as we begin the celebration of this 150th anniversary. Anglicans at LTSP. 7 years before the formation of the Lutheran Theological Seminary at Philadelphia in 1864, the Philadelphia Divinity School was established, and it existed as a seminary of the Episcopal Church USA until, for largely financial reasons, it closed its doors and merged with the Episcopal Divinity School in Massachusetts in 1974. Already in 1974, the ordination of women was being debated and was finally approved by the denomination in 1976. However, when I entered LTSP in 1974, there was already a handful of primarily Episcopal female students studying here. They were largely middle-aged women whose husbands were employed in the Philadelphia area and were geographically restricted. So they came to LTSP for their educations, while their general ordination exams were administered by the diocese. In due course, the local priest of St. Martin in the Fields, who subsequently became presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church USA, Frank Griswold, came to campus to teach Episcopal students. Dr. Wayne Whitson Floyd was another resource as he provided leadership for the Bonhoeffer Project. And on more than one occasion, Episcopal priest Paul Washington of the Church of the Advocate could be found on campus visiting in a faculty member's office. Finally, in 2003, Episcopalians endowed, imagine this, they endowed a chair of Anglican studies to provide permanently for the continued offering of Anglican studies, a chair now occupied by Professor Borsch. Over the last 50 years, the presence of Episcopal students, faculty, and a board representative have added to the richness of Mount Airy and its ecumenical identity. And I give thanks for it. Secondly, the Black church at LTSP. According to former Dean Faith Rohrbaugh, she was, and I quote, deep into the discussion with leaders of Philadelphia's African American community about the formation of the Urban Theological Institute, the UTI, in 1979. As the oral tradition has it, Randall Jones and Andrew Willis, the original co-directors of the UTI, were looking for a seminary in the local area where they could establish an evening and Saturday part-time educational program for ecumenical Black church Christians, yes, Baptists, Pentecostals, African Methodists, independent congregations, etc. They did not initially approach LTSP. Instead, they consulted first with Eastern Baptist Theological Seminary. Apparently, Eastern was not interested in the program, and so they reluctantly approached LTSP, fearing that they would not receive a welcome response from a German Lutheran, white-oriented institution. But, to their great surprise and amazement, Dean Rohrbaugh recognized both the context and the need and began to make the UTI a programmatic reality and strengthen the seminary's ecumenical and multicultural emphases. In its first years, only the MAR degree was offered. The program was strictly part-time, and there were restrictions on the number of majority and Lutheran students who could take what was intended to be courses with a Black church focus. At length, however, requests came from the UTI board and its students for the MDiv program to be offered and for the program to become full-time, notwithstanding the fact that many UTI students held full-time jobs. Yet in due course, the UTI program allowed the students to study full-time, and many day students took more night courses, many from Black adjunct faculty. The UTI became an integral part of the institution. Early on in the life of the UTI, a forum on Black preaching and theology was organized as a supplement to the programs and offerings to the Philadelphia and Black church community. annually, as still occurs today, the best black preachers and theologians from around the nation were and are brought to campus, as well as the surrounding neighborhoods. This forum has attracted hundreds, if not thousands, of people every year and has become a standard and much celebrated event on the seminary calendar. Like the Episcopal students in church, the UTI students and black churches have developed a commitment to LTSP akin to that of the Lutheran community. In witness to this, Grace Baptist Church in Germantown, along with the Reverend Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright, Jr., have initiated an endowment under the name of Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright, Sr., who received his STM degree from LTSP some years ago. Now, I must say although I was pleased that Philadelphia Seminary received this endowment, it's also the case that Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright, Jr., who pastored Trinity United Church of Christ on the south side of Chicago, was very close to LSTC and had visited our campus, was acquainted with our campus on many occasions. But we celebrate this gift at this seminary in these days. So, like the Episcopalians, the black church community in Philadelphia has now embraced this seminary as their seminary. And we see that an institution that once was exclusively Lutheran has now become increasingly ecumenical without losing its Lutheran identity. Next section, diversity on the faculty. Dr. Tappert's book, recognizing the 100th anniversary of the seminary, has a number of pictures located throughout its pages, a number of them of the faculty at various points in time. During that period of 100 years, there was not one woman, or for that matter, any ecumenical faculty or faculty of color that served at this institution. What a change LTSP has experienced over the last 25 to 50 years. Dr. Margaret Crick was the first female faculty member who arrived in the mid-1970s to teach Christian education. She was followed by Dr. Faith Rawbaugh a couple of years later, who taught church history and served superbly as academic dean for a number of years. Then, in 1985, Dr. Katie Day joined the faculty to teach church and community and urban ministry, becoming the first full-time ecumenical faculty member. And several years later, she was joined by Dr. Robert Robinson, who taught Old Testament and who still teaches Old Testament here at the seminary. What a change in this last 25 to 50 years. This diversity has also extended to full-time faculty of color. In the 1970s, Dr. Rudolph R. Featherstone, retired professor at Trinity Lutheran Seminary in Columbus, Ohio, served as shared faculty between Gettysburg Seminary and this one. But that only lasted several years. The next faculty member of color was yours truly. Early in my second year of seminary, Dr. Clarence Lee, then professor of early church history, who became my mentor and friend and golfing buddy for that matter, took me out to dinner in Chestnut Hill and shared his vision that LTSP needed more ethnic diversity on the faculty. He encouraged me to consider graduate school, gain the support of the faculty, and several years later was instrumental in establishing the Black Scholars Program at LTSP, the first of its kind among then LCA seminaries. As a result, I joined this faculty in 1982 and served until 1997. In the meantime, Dr. Richard Stewart succeeded me as LTSP's next Black scholar, and in the late 1980s, and just recently retired. Dr. Nelson Rivera became Dr. Stewart's successor as Scholar of Color in the 1990s. All three helped to diversify the nature of the faculty. At the present time, there are 3 international faculty, another important manifestation of diversity. Dr. Paul Rajashekar has been on the faculty since 1991, and the current dean, Dr. Sebastian, is now a second international faculty member, along with a third, Dr. Cavelas from Brazil. They add further diversity and an international dimension to the life of this institution and reflect its commitment to its multicultural, present, and international future. Another significant development, leadership at the seminary. Speaking of diversity, LTSP is a leader among ELC seminaries, especially where the dean's office is concerned. One woman, Faith Rohrbaugh, and 3 people of color, Dean Sebastian, Dean Rajashekar, and I, have served as dean and brought a special sensitivity to issues of gender and multiculturalism. These have been the wonderful expressions of shared leadership, and I give thanks for them. Another major section, the wall, the fence, and the guards. From 1864 until 1889, the seminary was located at 4th and Arch Streets in Center City, near the Benjamin Franklin Bridge. Then, according to Dr. Tappert, the institution was transported to suburban Mount Airy because, and I quote, "The part of the city in which the present seminary stands," it was reported, "has for a number of years terribly deteriorated and socially and morally. Race and Vine Streets, especially west of 7th Street, belong to the most depraved parts of the city. Since escaping from the city, the seminary has progressively over time made itself a part of the community and become a good neighbor in this expanding city." When I think about the seminary's connection to the community, I think about the wall and the fence. On one occasion, Faith Rohrbaugh quoting a colleague, said, quote, "Anyone who needs to know where the seminary is already knows. And if they don't know already, they probably don't need to." That colleague is not identified. I'm sure there's a dissertation in there for anyone who is interested. This comment conveys a certain separation from the community, a certain isolation that permitted the seminary to educate its students and the community to go about its own business. The wall has been there for some time now, and the fence was erected in the last 2 decades of the 20th century in light of the reality of crime. The guards have also been present on campus for a while, providing protection for its residents and deterring criminal activity. In some ways, these 3 symbols tell those who don't belong to stay out and keep away, making it more difficult and in some cases denying some others who would like to cross the seminary campus. Yet in recent years, the seminary has become increasingly involved in the life of the community. Dr. Andrew J. White, professor of church and community and director of internship, lived in Mount Airy for many years and urged me and others to make donations to the Mount Airy Village Development Corporation. He was a staunch advocate for more seminary involvement. Perhaps as a result of his lobbying, the seminary in the 1970s made a small investment in one of the buildings of the Mount Airy Business District and opened classrooms to the Mount Airy Learning Tree. Much more recently, Mount Airy has hosted many meetings and community events in Hagen Center, as well as this beautiful Brosman Center. In 2007, Philadelphia City Councilwoman Donna Reed, Pennsylvania State Senator Leanna M. Washington, and Mount Airy USA Executive Director Farah Jimenez wrote President Cray letters commending the seminary for hosting community meetings, and in particular, building a public plaza in front of the chapel on Germantown Avenue. Much of the credit for the community involvement justifiably goes to President Cray for his excellent leadership, and I give thanks for it. Listen to the first letter of President Jimenez. On behalf of the Board of Directors of Mount Airy USA, I am writing to support the Lutheran Theological Seminary in its plans to create a public plaza at the southernmost of its campus along Germantown Avenue. Lutheran has been an exceptional neighbor and friend, supporting the partnership with Mount Airy USA on numerous projects. Specifically, Lutherans was a major supporter of our street cleaning initiative, the Avenue Ambassadors you have generously offered, etc., etc. I now want to move on to campus renovation. And President Cray has already alluded to the $40 million that has been spent during the Hughes and Cray administrations to renovate this campus. But these last 25 years have witnessed the grand renovation and renewal of the campus under the leadership of Presidents Hughes and Cray. Whether the larger projects like the Wiedemann Center, the Brosman Center, the chapel, or the plaza, or the smaller projects, each has enhanced the beauty of this 13 acres and contributed to the enhancement of the Mount Airy community. And I do give thanks for that. Finally, just a word about preservation and actually perseverance in the midst of challenge. When LTSP observed its 125th anniversary, it, like other theological institutions, was on the verge of experiencing the economic boom of the 1990s. The new ELCA had just begun operations 2 years earlier, and the challenge of providing theological education seemed less daunting. And at that time, the first generation of ELCA seminary presidents was still in office and did not begin to retire until the mid-1990s. However, the two economic recessions of the first decade of the 20th century decreased grants from Synod and the much lesser degree from the ELCA, have presented the second and third generations of seminary presidents presidents that have been experienced by all freestanding institutions. Notwithstanding the needs to tighten the belt here and there, cultivate new donors, and adapt a more entrepreneurial approach and attitude, LTSP has persevered in the midst of challenge under the leadership of an excellent president. And I give thanks for that. And I think we ought to extend our appreciation at this point to President Cray. At 150 years, the Lutheran Theological Seminary at Philadelphia has a distinguished heritage and history, dating back to 1864, that deserves to be celebrated. And we are here in these days to do just that. We celebrate a tradition of Lutheran confessional faithfulness and attention to the liturgical tradition of the church. We celebrate rigorous study of the scriptures and serious academic endeavors. And more recently, and to these, we celebrate a diversity among faculty, staff, and students that extends to gender, ethnicity, denominational identity, sexual orientation, and race, that is who God's people are. We celebrate the renovation of the campus and the strengthening of community ties. The seminary has evolved over the course of 150 years, but its one constant has been faithfulness to the various contexts in which God has located it. For all it has been, for all that it is now, and for all it will be, thanks be to God. Thank you.